significantly guided by the UN Convention Against Corruption, or UNCAC. And this is a comprehensive and wide-ranging convention agreed by the UN General Assembly in 2003, October, I think, of 2003, and entered into force in December of 2005. Interestingly, one of the first states parties to UNCAC was Kenya, which ratified the convention on 9th of December 2003. Now, the convention consists of 8 chapters and 71 articles, and divided into 4 thematic areas: prevention, law enforcement, decriminalisation, international cooperation, and asset recovery. So what does UNCAC say about the private sector, and what impact, realistically, can an international convention have on business activities of the average company? Well, quite a lot, actually, in both respects. So the obligations UNCAC imposes on national governments include a number of articles referring to private sector prevention measures and enforcement against private sector actors involved in corruption. And importantly, where governments fulfill implementation requirements, the convention will impact upon the conduct of business in the countries in which the companies operate, and so it's highly relevant for the business community. Now, in UNCAC, Article 12 in particular, which Sigall's already mentioned, lists a variety of measures that states parties should take to prevent corruption in the private sector. And these include, some of these are better observed than others, it has to be said, promoting cooperation between law enforcement agencies and relevant private entities. That can sometimes be a struggle because of information sharing and so on. Promoting the development of standards and procedures designed to safeguard the integrity of relevant private entities. Promoting transparency among private entities, for example, the identity of legal and natural persons involved in the establishment and management of corporate entities. Preventing the misuse of procedures regulating private entities, for example, subsidies, licenses, that kind of thing. Preventing conflicts of interests. And ensuring that private enterprises, taking into account their structure and size, have sufficient internal auditing controls to assist in preventing and detecting acts of corruption, and that the accounts and required financial statements are subject to auditing and certification. So while the Convention doesn't list specific requirements regarding the development of anti-corruption standards and procedures, the principles which inform the Convention are clear. And some businesses recognise that it's in their own interests to behave ethically, and that they have a responsibility, which some feel more strongly than others, it has to be said, to act as good corporate citizens. Of course, some balance possible risks and costs of corrupt business practices against the benefits of those practices. But companies that adopt anti-corruption programs will typically do so for a combination of reasons, including avoidance of costs and penalties, and potential rewards for good practice. The companies that adhere to anti-corruption standards understand, and this is very much applicable in Kenya in relation to a project I'll discuss with you in a moment, that they may benefit from a competitive advantage with customers, suppliers, and investors. Now, they may receive, it's not an easy thing to do, but it's possible, preferential treatment in procurement processes, reduced legal liability, and reputational enhancement. There may also be some recruiting advantages to this. So these considerations are of relevance not only for large companies, but also for small and medium-sized companies, and that's particularly important in the Kenyan context, where there are very, very many SMEs, small and medium enterprises, and very many in the informal sector. So, for example, a small manufacturer with a reputation for operating ethically increases its chances of selection as a supplier to a large multinational in its supply chain, as those large companies seek to reduce liability risks within their own operations. Now, again, as I say, all of these issues we'll touch again later in the context of Kenya's own private sector anti-corruption champion, Nizar Juma, and his Blue Company project. But first, we need to consider the Kenyan private sector more broadly, because it's a particularly interesting environment. I think we can probably all agree that a thriving private sector is central to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, because state-driven activity alone will not bring about the necessary change to achieve long-term goals. So in Kenya, it's no different. In fact, the Kenyan private sector is a fundamental plank of the country's developmental progress. Just a small caveat at this point. So any assessment of an economy in June of 2020 is, of course, subject to the heavy impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. But before COVID struck, it would not be inaccurate to say the following about the Kenyan private sector. So it's vibrant and in good health. And by sub-Saharan standards and regional standards, it's well developed and large. And it plays the leading part in the Kenyan economy as opposed to the state. It's split noticeably into two parts. So firstly, a large formal business sector, which is productive. And secondly, a massive informal small business sector that's not particularly well understood or supported, and actually which employs almost 90% of Kenyan workers. Extraordinary figure, really. Now, significantly, Kenyan private sector benefits from a well-educated and entrepreneurial workforce, very much so. I sometimes think that Kenya is the beating capitalist heart of the world. It's a net exporter to all other East African community countries. And in the global market, the private sector is highly competitive in a variety of export products, especially tea, cut flowers, vegetables and cements. But of course, it faces considerable challenges. And corruption is arguably the greatest hindrance to Kenya's private sector achieving its very considerable potential. Widespread tax evasion hinders Kenya's ability to generate sufficient tax revenues to maintain its existing infrastructure, let alone new developments, and many of which are currently funded by foreign loans. More importantly, bribery, particularly that taking place at the public-private sector interface, is a persistent threat to Kenya's economic well-being. Just as in most of the jurisdictions, including my own country, the UK, there have been corruption scandals over the years, from a maize-related scandal in the 1960s, which led to a full commission of inquiry, through the Goldenberg scandal in the 1990s, which the then education minister and a former president were implicated, to more recent times, including the arrest of the governor of Nairobi and a significant number of other senior government officials across a number of different government departments. But it's not only this, though. Corruption is a challenge to the rule of law in Kenya. So it's widely recognised that the January 2019 Al-Shabaab terrorist attack, which took place in Nairobi, and in which 21 innocent people lost their lives, was facilitated by corruption in at least one government agency. And it's in that context that Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta last year described corruption as a national security threat. Now, recognising the need to tackle it as a matter of urgency, he's often used terms such as the war on corruption. And I just want to delve a little bit into some of the public sector stuff, because it's relevant to what we're talking about in the private sector. So at the vanguard of that battle is Kenya's Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the EACC. This is Kenya's own anti-corruption authority, and it's been busy of late. So in 2019, in a move thought impossible previously, it arrested the governor of Nairobi, and he now faces serious corruption charges. In the same year, EACC also arrested a sitting finance minister for his alleged part in a corruption scam worth 19 billion Kenyan shillings, or 180 million US dollars. And during the 2018-19 financial year, the EACC recovered 3.1 billion Kenyan shillings of assets stolen by criminals and corrupt officials, and that's over 29 million US dollars. Since its creation in 2003, EACC has secured about 300 convictions for corruption and economic crime, so it's doing quite well. But naturally, the focus of most of this work is within government ministries, devolved institutions and agencies. But of course, as we know, corruption, and grand corruption in particular, is the result of both demand and supply. It requires both a public sector and a private sector side. So the large procurement fraud, for example, won't work unless there's a company or individuals working for the company who stand to gain from the illegal activity and then provide a kickback to the government officials who have facilitated the scheme. And it has to be said that the business environment in Kenya is stained by the existence of schemes like this. It's anti-competitive, it distorts the market, and of course it's Kenyan citizens who frequently bear the brunt through poor infrastructure, inadequate housing, education and health facilities. Now, I'm reliably informed by those within the business sector in Kenya that for some, the cost of doing business, as they put it, means that annual company accounts have severely bloated expense columns to allow for the bribes that it's considered must be paid to secure advantageous deals. Now, it's in that context that a remarkable Kenyan businessman and one of the most energetic men I think I've ever met stepped up. So Nizar Juma, now aged 76, is probably the most prolific board chairman in Kenya and quite possibly the whole of East Africa, frankly, in my view, the world. He's also the founder of something called the Blue Company Project, which is something that my colleague and I, Jennifer, are very excited about and really hope we can get moving on. So currently, Mr. Juma is the chair of something called the Jubilee Group of Companies, which operates in East Africa, principally in Kenya. He's also the chair of over 30 other companies. And he decided in 2018 that he'd had enough of corruption and bribery in the private sector and the damage it was doing to Kenya and the welfare of his fellow Kenyans. So he founded the Blue Company Project. Now, in essence, it seeks to promote a culture of integrity in the private sector and promote best practice in governance, leadership, integrity, and anti-corruption. Now, let's imagine one of you owns a company in Kenya and you want to be part of this new initiative. What do you need to do? Well, membership of the Blue Company Project has a number of requirements. So you, as the Chief Executive Officer, commit in writing to all of the board and your staff that the company is commencing a zero-tolerance approach to corruption, applicable to everyone, and that no employee is allowed to give or take bribes in any form, and that contravening this condition of employment will be treated as gross misconduct, and you'll be liable to summary dismissal. Now, you as the Chief Executive Officer will also declare all donations, gifts and favours given or received by the company or any employee to a customer or potential customer, supplier or potential supplier, government official or representative has to be transparent. In other words, declared and official. And also, and importantly in this context, through the CEO, there has to be a declared policy of being free from practices of favoritism on grounds of tribe, gender, religion, colour or creed or any other form of bias. And if there's any audience members who are Kenyan, you'll particularly understand what I mean when I say tribe being important. The company also agrees, and this is a new addition to the company requirements, that the company agrees to the prospect of undergoing training with Unodc on developing and implementing anti-bribery and whistleblowing policy and procedures. I'll come to that in more detail in a moment. And significantly, in this context, Blue Company members trade preferentially with one another. We'll explore more why that's important. Now, membership is for 1 year, renewable, and the Blue Company board is comprised of four very senior business executives from Kenya and beyond, including, of course, Mr. Juma. They make the decision as to whether an application for membership is accepted. They also make the decision on renewal. So you may ask, why would a company want to be a member if the cost of doing business is to pay bribes? And that's the way you've always done it. And a number of people have said this to me in the business community. So the idea is that membership brings with it a competitive advantage. So inclusion within a large group, and there are over 500 companies in Kenya signed up to this already. And Mr. Juma is hopeful that we will get over 1,000 once we officially launch later this year, we hope. So within a large group of respected entities visibly taking a stand against bribery and corruption through the use of the Blue Company logo. And if you visit bluecompany.org on the website, you will see. It's a nice glossy website, and it explains all of this far more eloquently than I am. So secondly, it's a unique opportunity to benefit from network group purchase deals, because blue companies will give preference to one another in business dealings. Third, brand visibility is raised and costs are reduced. So regular publicity around the Blue Company concept should discourage solicitation from corrupt companies, thus helping to reduce the cost of doing business. Fourth is ownership. So employees and other stakeholders of blue companies will be proud, and some of them are, to associate themselves with such companies, thereby strengthening the image of their respective brands. Now, for about 12-18 months, Unodc has partnered with the Blue Company in a pilot project, which we haven't quite got off the ground yet because of COVID. And we're going to provide training to a number of Blue Company members in the areas of whistleblowing and anti-bribery procedures. Now, the training will be tailored to the needs of each company in order to assist them to implement solid measures to address corruption risk and ensure a safe and confidential platform for any staff member concerned about practices within the company. Now, I think, and I know Jennifer shares my view, and Jennifer will be speaking in a moment, that this is a really exciting initiative in Kenya, and one in which Unodc is really proud to partner with the Kenyan private sector. Perhaps one of the most exciting elements of this initiative is that it can and should be adopted almost anywhere across the globe where there is a desire in the private sector to turn away from corruption. Now, on a closing note, and emphasizing the need for action even in a pandemic-dominated world, I think it's worth remembering that corruption really doesn't know any boundaries. So, in Somalia, a jurisdiction that I also deal with and have spent quite some time in for the last 12-18 months, the current Attorney General gave a rare press conference last week, and he declared that more than 20 Somali Ministry of Health officials had been arrested, their bank accounts frozen, and substantial evidence from their homes and businesses seized. And what were the alleged crimes? Well, that internationally donated COVID-19 emergency funding had been siphoned illegally to private firms working with the ministry. Now, this was meant to be used for a COVID-19 quarantine facility in Mogadishu, but hundreds of thousands of US dollars appear to be missing, and meanwhile, people in Somalia die from the virus. Now, whilst the ministry officials have been arrested, this scheme would not have been possible without the involvement of the private sector. And much of this money, in any event, finds its way into Kenya and is laundered there in part by unscrupulous lawyers and accountants. So again, we see the fundamental role that the private sector plays in the facilitation of corruption, and perhaps more importantly, the critical role it can play in its prevention. That's maybe a sobering thought, but I think it's one which should spur us all once more into battle, as President Kenyatta would say, in the war on corruption. Now, thank you very much. I hope you're all still awake. Thank you for your time. I think it's time for my colleague Jennifer to take over from me.
Thanks, David. I just wanted to say that was fascinating. I think you hypnotized the audience because all participants but there's absolute silence on the chat. So I think people just like hypnotized and taking it all in. And yeah, and let's go to Jen. Feel free to ask questions also about David in the chat. And I'll turn those questions to David. So thanks very much. Go ahead, Jen. And yeah, we're all.
Did we just lose Sigall?
Yeah, it seems so. It seems so.
Yeah, she's coming back.
Sorry.
It kicked me out of the moderator position, but I was still here.
It wasn't me.
All right, I'm gonna shut up, let Jen take the floor and whip us away.
Okay, so thank you, David. It's very difficult to speak after that, but I'll do my best to do that. So David has, of course, spoken and given a great overview of Kenya's private sector corruption and what's going on down here, and the kind of initiatives that Unodc is undertaking. And of course, I agree with David about the potential of the the Blue Company project and what it can do for private sector members here in Kenya, because it is owned by the private sector members. It comes from them. They seem to be very passionate about it. And I mean, it has the potential to grow massively over and beyond even within our borders to East Africa and whatnot, because some of the companies involved in this particular project actually have business in other East African countries. So we actually are hopeful about that. However, I would like to speak about another project that we are undertaking that we call the Global Integrity Education Project. Now, this speaks to, for those who are here in the session just before this one, this speaks to what Sigall and Alex do. And I'd like to just highlight the kind of work and the progress that we've made here in Kenya. Allow me to start by just stating that there was a survey that was conducted in 2016 on the youth of East Africa, and it showed that 50 to 58% of young people in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda said that it actually doesn't matter how one makes money here as long as you do not end up in jail. Now, I found that hilarious, but however, it's also really saddening because it speaks to the societal attitudes that young people have when it comes to corruption. The AU went ahead to estimate last year that over $150 billion are lost to corruption in the African continent. And this is 25% of our GDP, of our collective GDP. Which is of course problematic, and at times it also exceeds the amount of money that we receive in terms of foreign aid for sub-Saharan Africa. Now, of course, corruption here exists in various forms, but the most popular one here is bribery. And further research has shown that up to 75% of private enterprises in Kenya have reported being forced to, make illegal payments just to resolve some existing business problems, or even to just, grow your business here. And again, 77% of the top business managers that we have here in Kenya's thriving private sector have also said that, they would justify an unethical behavior as long as it allows their business to survive. So, of course, this is troubling. And this is where the Global Integrity Education Project comes in. Because corruption is about people. At the end of the day, governments and companies operate through human beings. They do not operate by themselves. So unethical behavior that is espoused in people will be definitely reflected in institutions. Now, the Integrity Education Project is premised on the fact that social norms and values such as accountability, transparency, etc., are actually very critical in preventing corruptions. And schools and universities in this case have, of course, crucial roles to play in teaching these norms to young people and ensuring that they prepare them for adult life and they prepare them properly to join the workforce. The traditional methods of preventing corruption and actually punishing economic crimes that my colleague David has alluded to have heavily relied on, limiting discretion of private sector members, or discretion of public officers, and also increasing accountability where need be on the part of decision makers. And this, in my opinion, has resulted in a lot of legislative and policy interventions that we have adopted that focus strongly on enforcement system, and really a system of punishing. So we have, for instance, in Kenya, we have a myriad of laws that can be, we can trace back to 2002 all the way to 2010 when we had the new constitution that tackle economic crimes, but there's still a problem. There's still a problem with societal values. So essentially, to effectively prevent corruption, we are of the view that we need to build on social norms and values, and we've also found that we need to underscore the importance of society to not only hold government accountable, but also for citizenry, specifically here in Kenya, to understand that that we need to uphold our own responsibilities for the purposes of integrity. Legal remedies are limited. They cannot be fully relied on, precisely because I don't think every situation, it's not that every situation that a decision maker encounters that they have, that the law has an answer to. So sometimes there's extensive discretion, and this is where ethics and integrity come in to allow you to make up what scholars would say is fair and more transparent decision. So, of course, as a young person, I also believe that young people are central to this society's culture. We are at the core of the social unit of society, and in terms of education, I think that education in this sense is a very important tool for, reaching young people. This is where majority of the young people in the country will be. They will be in school. So this is actually an important tool to teach ethics and integrity. Also, my colleague mentioned the specific provisions in UNCAC, that's the United Nations Conventions Against Corruption, that provides for private sector corruption. I'd also like to highlight that there are provisions, specifically Article 13, that talks about or calls for public education programs to foster non-tolerance of corruption. And it also encourages countries to include the topic in their school and university curricula. So UNCAC does provide for this. And for Kenya specifically, following in the spirit of its new constitution that was promulgated in 2010, includes provisions of national values and principles, and most recently, the current government administration has been calling for, the inculcation of ethics and integrity education in the new competency-based curriculum. And we hope that part of this project, we hope that an element of this project will be borrowed or endorsed by government, that the project will be successful to an extent that these modules then will be, widely used in the country. Now, to the specifics of the project that I promised to talk about. So this particular project brings together business and academicians together to develop and implement innovative integrity education programs. This will be applied in universities and in companies who will use, in terms of on-the-job training programs. Now, the ultimate goal, of course, at the end is to foster ethical decision-making in the private sector. We want to equip young graduates with ethical mindset so that at the start of their careers, they're armored with the right attitudes and, ready to fight this pervasive, and what our president says, it eats us to the core. It's at the core of our moral character. So it's a 3-year project. It was launched in October 2019, and it's currently being implemented in 3 countries on 3 continents. That's here in Kenya, Pakistan, and Mexico. And I think there will be a session after this for the Mexicans to also tell their story and, and just explain how far they've come with the project. We hope to maximize, and we're building on the work and the impact of the UNODC global modules, the Education for Justice modules that were adopted under the auspices of the Doha Declaration, I think, and we will be adapting them to our local context and empowering our lecturers in our various universities, public and private, to teach them to their final year students from various backgrounds. Now, to ensure, of course, relevancy in Kenya, what we've done is that we have put together a local working group that draws from key high-level business managers and also draws from academics who are working, with Unodc, and we've been working together for a while now to contextualize these modules and enrich them with various things, with case studies. We are working on including local reading materials, developed by local scholars and academicians, including short videos to just tell stories of anti-corruption champions, people who've actually stood up with their principles and succeeded, and also a bit of infographics, just a lot of material here and there. The Kenya Working Group is composed of 12 private sector members so far and 7 academicians who teach in various universities. The project is broken down into 4 phases. Kenya is currently implementing the phase 1, and in this particular phase, we have selected the modules. We are currently working on contextualizing them. We've selected 4 modules out of 20 E4J modules on anti-corruption and ethics and integrity. We will be working on drafting a teaching guide to use teaching guide for the use of these particular modules. We will be also developing an online training of trainers course for the lecturers, and we hope that we'll be able to deliver training for 60 plus lecturers in Kenya who will then be involved in the training of university students. I would like to note at this point that, of course, with the impact of COVID-19, we've been moved and we've had to innovate around, project implementation by adopting the use of various online platforms for meetings, for our discussions on a day-to-day basis, and also, converting the trainings that would have previously been one-on-one to online trainings. And because we are set to achieve the objectives that we set out to from the beginning. This, in my opinion, only goes to show that we are committed and that we share in a universal human resilience, that whatever happens, we will push through and try and do what we ought to do for humanity. So and then we have the second phase of the project, which will involve training students at the university, and it will take place in the second year of the project. So this is for the next year, and in this period we will be selecting participating universities or programs, and of that, and then of course we hope to train at least 1,500 students in the participating universities, and we'll of course set up a support group to support these lecturers in their work. We'll continue, we will not stop there, we'll continue to engage students after graduation, and will to empower them to serve as ethics ambassadors at their workplaces. And this will be the third phase of the project. In parallel, at the same time, the teaching of the project modules will actually continue in universities, in the select universities, and the ethics ambassadors and their managers, will be encouraged to come back to university as guest lecturers and, share their experiences. And also, of importance for this particular phase is that we will see, academics and the private sector coming together to actually bring their heads together to see how to solve some of the challenges associated with ethics and integrity, and also just work together, which would be refreshing, And then we will also have, a monitoring and evaluation element to this, and this was done, and we've engaged academicians to do this, to actually develop a good MEL framework to do this. I mentioned before, and I alluded to on the job training sessions that will happen for approximately 100 employees, we hope. We'll also develop on the job training modules based on project university modules. We hope to carry out periodic impact studies, and then we'll share the modules widely through our website and other various platforms. In conclusion, while the main focus of this project is essentially to equip young graduates with ethical mindsets, I'd also like to note that this project is expected to, of course, increase the ethical commitment of the private sector. And this also speaks to the Blue Company project and the hope that it brings. You know, we hope to increase their commitment to, you know, to promoting clean business and integrity in their work, and the awareness of this particular thing for the business sector will help us even, you know, grow further. And I saw in the previous session that there were questions around ethics and how it relates to competition. These are things that we will actually study in the process, and we hope to borrow as much as we can. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Okay, fantastic. So we did prepare a short message from our working group members here in Kenya. And at this stage, I'd like to request Alex to, you know, start preparing to show the video.
And this might be
Sure. I see Sigall has a question.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so I just thought it's a good time to let you know that there's a question from the participants before we move to the video. And this is Edna Kimenju, who is asking whether the program is case study based or theoretical.
It's the Edna, I'd like to get a clarification on that question, because the case studies that I mentioned are going to be used to contextualize this particular modules. And we've also borrowed from case studies that have been developed from the Ethics and Integrity Commission, EACC, here in Kenya. So we'll be getting scenarios that speak to Kenyan people, that Kenyan people understand. So I think Edna Kimenju may be a Kenyan. So for instance, it's very easy if you give a scenario of police bribery and, you know, cops asking for a bribe here in Kenya, students relate to that. So the idea is to use case studies to enrich the modules and also for the students to relate. So I would say, if I understand your question correctly, there's a lot of case studies involved. So yes, case study based. Is there any other question?
No, I don't see any other questions at the moment. So I think we could proceed with the video. And maybe we'll have some questions afterwards, because we still have some time.
Yeah.
So I think, is Alex going to put up the video? Alex, are you okay with that?
Yes, I'm turning it right now.
Super. So everybody sit back and enjoy. It's a really awesome.
Yes, and I would also like to mention that some of our working group members, I think, are logged in. So just
how long is the video? Jen, do you want to say it to everyone? How long is the video, so they know how long to expect to be viewing it?
All right, the video is about 15 minutes. Yeah, and it involves, I think, about 6 people will be speaking in the video. I hope that it's not boring, but we've tried our best to make it as catchy as possible, Sigall.
That's not boring at all.
Thank you.
It just shows how context grounded the project is. It really does show how it's around the lives of all walks of society in Kenya. So it's very interesting in that regard.
Yeah. Alex, have you started playing?
So everyone can hover when they see it in a small screen. If you see the video coming in like a quarter of the monitor, you can double click on it and it grows. Every single attendee can do that.
I hope you can see it now.
Yes.
Great.
Alex, do you mind starting over? I think there's a problem with the feed.
Sorry, with what?
There's a problem with the feed. Do you mind starting over the video?
Okay, just let me know if it's fine.
Okay, I'm not getting a kind of a legible movie coming on my end. I don't know, Jennifer, if you could see it well.
The same thing for me. It keeps it's not buffering really, but just there seems to be a problem. Yeah, there seems to be some glitch.
Yeah, the people in the chat are also saying they can't see it. So Alex, on his end, where he's sharing it, he sees it fine. So he doesn't know that we can't see it fine. So I think we need to stop that. Maybe we try. I can try sharing with my computer. Sometimes, one computer works, the other doesn't.
Yeah.
So Alex, if you stop your screen share, for a moment, maybe I could try to do it from my end.
Okay.
Okay.
Now a real estate developer. That's the business that I'm involved. I'm the executive chairman of a company called Resorts and Cities, where we do developments. I'm serving also as one of the advisors to several programs on private sector development in Kenya. So I'm very much involved, and also chair the multi-sector forum, which champions governance and integrity, which brings all the sectors of the economy and society together to champion ethics and good governance.
Young people in the society are faced with a lot of challenges when they get into the private sector. This is because they are the ones who own the small and medium enterprises. They are trying to start up businesses, but because of the cost that is attached to corruption, they are unable to grow these businesses. And at times are faced with the question again, that whether do I stand with the values of ethics and integrity, or do I use a bribe to get a license? Do I use a bribe to advance my business so that my business can grow? And this affects the country greatly because the cost of living becomes high. This affects greatly the small and medium enterprises because when there is a lot of corruption in the country, we don't have investors coming into the country to invest. They lack people to support their young budding businesses. And this really affects the young people in the society. When the society does not grow from the bottom up, we will have a society that cannot sustain itself.
As private sector, what we have seen is that a lot of the young people who are coming into the workplace have not been taken through proper mentorship around issues of ethics values, and governance. And therefore, when they come into the workplace, they simply pick the bad ideas that they find already being practiced. So our aim and our focus is to see young people who come to the workplace already committed to high ideals of values, integrity, and ethics, because then they'll be able to practice them and they'll be the agents of change within the private sector. What you find with the integrity education in the country is that you find most of the schools and most of the universities, they actually, just like I said, like we do here at the University of Nairobi, we have courses scattered in different units. You have the principles of ethics scattered in different units, and they are being taught in different units. And you find that most of the schools and universities, they don't have standalone ethics courses. And it's because of this reason that we at the University of Nairobi, we have actually thought it's a good idea to have a standalone course on ethics that can equip our students with the skills, the transferable skills that they need to make sure that once they get to the professional world, they actually don't get into integrity issues, and they're able to do their business in a very ethical way.
Most Kenyan universities, there is no standalone course that is taught to young graduates or undergraduates that talks about integrity and ethics and the values that should be enshrined within our society. This affects our country greatly because when the young people do get into the job market, they have not cultivated the culture of integrity and ethics into their work environment.
The course on constitutional law that we teach for first years, you find that our constitution has a whole chapter on leadership and integrity. It also has another chapter on values of public service. And so these are principles that we teach, not only in the constitutional law course, but in all the other courses that have something to do with constitutional law. These could be courses to do with public procurement, courses to do with evidence law, criminal procedure, criminal law, and even procurement law. And at the master's level, we have a standalone course that we call corporate governance and ethics, and which is taken by very many students who are taking the financial and commercial stream of the courses that we offer.
Young people are coming up when they think it is fashionable to be corrupt. So you get students talking and saying that when I grow up, I hope to work in a company where I can actually get rich very quickly. But they don't know what it means to get rich. They think for you to get rich, you have to engage in corrupt deals. And this is the worldview we want to change. So the university is in the process of coming up with this particular course known as professional ethics, which will be different from what we were offering earlier, because earlier we were offering Christian ethics. But now we want to look at what is happening in the society. And this will make our students marketable even to the private sector, the job market. So when they are taken out there, there'll be people who will be making decisions and they know the consequences of their decisions, and they'll be very good people.
Even though we are, all of us now are determined to fight corruption, and we have sat as private sector and prioritize this as a high priority, we know that services or non-existent services. And now we are saying we must come down on this ratio to the bare minimum. An enabling environment requires that you have got proper ethics and integrity within a country, nation. Then you prevent investors, both local and foreign, from investing their funds. So investment is highly affected by issues of corruption. Over the last 2 years, we have seen a renewed energy, and the president championing from the front. That has energized us. That has given us now a platform for us to really join hands with him and the entire government to fight corruption. And we have a great opportunity now. And I can say that over the last 2 years, there has been improvement. Private sector commitment has increased. We have become vigilant amongst ourselves. And we have also seen that government has embraced our partnership. And now we are working together. And I believe that is what will help us win this battle. We believe that the project will impact the private sector because this is now a good foundation for training and mentorship, because the private sector needs to absorb a workforce who already have high values in terms of ethics and integrity. So when you have good people coming into the enterprise, they become the seed of change. It is the young people who are going to change the thinking around private sector. Because when they come with the right ideals, they come with a commitment to make things work out, then they are going to be the agents of change that we are looking for. So we have to do that investment. And that is why we are there as private sector.
Students in Kenya and around the world, I believe, face a lot of challenges when it comes to the job market, when they're about to enter the job market. You have spent years and years in school, therefore you have accrued student loans. You have challenges to deal with financial stability. You're trying to start your life. You're also trying to help out your family. And you are grappling with the question that I need to get a job, but you find that you have challenges that you face. I stand with my values of ethics and integrity that are enshrined in our constitution, or do I use the back door? Do I bribe someone? Do I use someone that I know so that I can get a job? And these are some of the challenges that young people are facing when they are getting into the job market. Once they get into the job market, you're now faced with the next thing. I want to earn more. I want to climb up the ladder of success, the executive ladder. How do I climb that ladder without, again, going against my ethics and integrity values that I do value, whereby you are faced with a question. If I want to get ahead in my position, how do I do so without bribing, without knowing someone, and without using the back door again for me to get what I want in the job market? The challenges that face the country when you have a society that does not value integrity and has no ethics enshrined into their culture affects the country greatly. This brings about a situation where it's a man-eat-man society, and this will make the country not grow to its optimum level. The Global Integrity Education Project by Unodc brings about a situation where students or young people in the society are taught online using modules that they can be able to bring into the job marketplace, being that there is no standalone course that offers ethics and integrity in our university's curriculum. It would be prudent that projects like the Global Integrity Education Project by the Unodc is embraced into our curriculum, so that the young people, when they do get into the job markets, have already gotten the culture of being people of integrity, valuing the ethics that they need in order to grow this country.
The Global Integrity Education Project is going to be very effective in terms of, as we move forward to issue a standalone course on professional ethics, we are going to use the experience of the Global Project, Integrity Education Project, to make sure that we inculcate the values that we are getting from that global education project into the teaching of professional ethics for our students. And we are going to make the professional ethics a compulsory course for each and every of our students. This is going to be done at the 4th year of their study. And I think that is going to be very critical in terms of equipping them with the skills of integrity that they need just before they get to the job market.
By showcasing practical scenarios and case studies, it will actually impact positively on the students who will be taking up the lessons. One, I believe, once students go through these projects, these modules, we shall have positive mindsets within the chunks that are coming out from the universities and who are coming into the private sector in employment. And you'll find that this, because of the peer pressure, they'll be able to impact their fellow peers within the industry, and ultimately the industry will be able to eradicate most of the vice that relate to integrity issues.
The project is being implemented in 3 phases. Currently, we are in phase 1, which entails selecting the modules, designing case studies for the module, and localizing the modules to fit the Kenya context. The Global Integrity Project in Kenya by UNODC comes at the right time when the national government is trying to advance and institute frameworks and programs that advance national values and cohesion. I believe that the project is going to help both the private sector players and the academicians and the students in advancing the national goals.
This country will not get to higher heights, or this country will not achieve its optimum potential if the society is rotten to the core. We need to weave in ethics and integrity values into the social fabric of our country and our continent, so that our country and continent can compete globally.
I lecture economic crimes investigation and forensic science, and at the same time, I'm also the deputy director. I'm the working group team leader for the Global Integrity Project in Kenya. My task in the group involves bringing people together in the group and at the same time coordinating the activities of the working group members. The working group members constitute members from academia and also members from the private sector.
The reason why we are part of this project is because it's very important to offer ethics-related education.
Thank you, Sigall. Sorry, everybody, for the glitch. We think we're realizing that perhaps there's a problem with our platform, so we'll just we'll check with the organizers for that. But essentially, the working group members had a lot to say, and as you can see, they are really excited and passionate about the project. And I'm really grateful to be working with them. I think at this point, I also would like to really appreciate them for those of them who've joined us in this session. I really thank you for your continued commitment and your work, and I look forward to continue, working to actually make this project a reality. I think I'll yield the floor to my colleague David, who will give us closing remarks. And so we will share the video on our website. That's UNODC. I've shared the link on the chat box, but that's just the UNODC website. Then you go to the section for the Eastern African office. We will soon share that, and you'll be able to see the message from there. But bear with us. I apologize for that. David, unmute your mic.
It's unmuted. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. All right, sorry. I was just saying, anyone who couldn't quite catch all of the video, please check it out at the Unodc website. It's a great video, and Jen's being very modest, as usual. But it's a great effort done at very short notice, and hats off to her. So I'd just like to say a very big thank you to everyone who's been involved in making this relatively small session work. A lot of hard work gone into it. Jennifer in particular, and Sigall looking on, and Alex doing his tech bit. So thank you to all of you, and I hope even at least one of you who's been watching might feel a little bit inspired to think of what's happening in Kenya as being a really exciting moment. I do think it's a special time in Kenya's history. We have a president who seems very keen in the fight against corruption. We have crooks being arrested and prosecuted. We have homegrown initiatives like the Blue Company Project. We have the Global Integrity Project. Lots happening. And I'm just really excited that I'm part of it, that I have the privilege of being part of it. And looking forward to getting on my flight on Friday morning and finding myself in Nairobi on Friday evening. Curfew permitting, of course. Oh, thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you can hear me. Fingers up if you can.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, all the participants, David and Jennifer. We are going to continue around the clock, following the sun with this booth. I just published the hours for the next sessions. And in between the sessions, some of our colleagues might come up for rehearsals. You're allowed to peek, but don't be too hard on them. Thanks again very much. Wonderful film. I could see it on my end perfectly, but I was sharing my screen. Do look it up on the Unodc website. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you in a couple of hours with Mexico.